What's up? I'm Bee and welcome to my channel. Today we are talking about a pretty serious topic involving Josh from the Dad Challenge podcast. Now recently he is getting a lot of attention for a clip that was originally included in one of his most recent videos about basically the fall of Hillsong. This clip has caused a lot of upset and that's pretty understandable. So we're going to take a look at the clip. Then we're going to take a look at the subsequent community post that he posted and then his follow-up statement. And this is involving a situation that happened at the church that he used to work at. Now, if you are a longtime viewer of my channel, you will know that I am a PK. I'm a preacher's kid. Both of my parents were pastors growing up, and so I definitely have a lot of experience with kind of things going on behind the scenes in terms of leadership at churches. And if you watch Josh's channel, you know that he does as well because he used to be a pastor and he has this whole 6-part series talking about how in his eyes he was illegally fired. And so I think that's something that we should probably keep in mind while we are watching these videos. Josh has a history with the church that is not positive. Josh was hurt by the church. And to be perfectly honest, based on the way that he speaks about organized religion, I don't think he is fully healed from that. That is not a dig, that is just a simple observation. And even in the video that this clip is from, he talks about how his wife loves church and she wants to go back, but he's just not quite ready. And so, like I said, let's just sort of keep this in mind. Before we jump into the video, I will just let you know that this is going to be regarding the essay of a child. So if that's something that you do not want to hear about and you are not interested in hearing about, feel free to click off the video, but you have been warned.
On the US and Canada, you'll never know about because they'll keep it secret until they can no longer keep it secret. They will. In the church that I just served at, I think about 3 or 4 months before I was fired, could have been a little bit longer than that, there was a youth leader in our church, an adult youth leader, male, okay? Nobody at that church to this day probably knows this, but he essayed a student, okay? Was asked to step down. We sat down at a...
When he says nobody at that church knows this, I'm assuming he's referring to the congregation because he's obviously going to talk about how there was a staff meeting where this situation was discussed. So logically that implies people do know about it, but I'm assuming he's referring to the general public of the church.
Leadership meeting, okay? Where the lead pastor, no, executive pastor, the guy who was supposed to say, because then the lead pastor can have, plausible deniability, okay? Where he said, look, this went down in this leadership meeting, told all the staff that this had happened. And if anybody from the media comes and talks to you, you don't say a word. We were threatened. Don't you dare say a word. You ignore it, you send them to me. I'm probably gonna do a whistleblow on.
Okay, so staff is in a meeting. They're all being told about this situation and they're being instructed to not say anything if someone from the media comes to talk to them about it.
On that, I want to get to the bottom of it because that was all we ever heard of that, even as a staff. That this.
He wants to get to the bottom of it because that was all they ever heard as a staff. This thing happened. Don't talk to the media about it. And I'm sure it's kind of annoying that I'm just pausing it and repeating what he's saying. But when we get to the community tab post and the video that he made after, these are things that I want you to remember. He says that is all we heard about it.
And I'm sure it's happened multiple times at this church, and it has in the past, okay? But why would they not tell people? Because they don't want people to leave, right? That's a secret that so many churches have held onto. Catholic Church, churches in general. The essaying and assaults that go on with kids and people in general all over the place is in the millions and millions and millions. It's a place where predators will go to be a part of because they have access to kids. And
that's why as a church you should have a safety plan in place. You need to have an organized safety plan that you follow, that you abide by, a training that every volunteer has to go through. Like Josh served at a big church, according to what he has said. And so this church, they should have a child safety plan in place to prevent things like this happening. And I'm not saying that they don't, but I mean, it is a common thing. Like people will go to places where they think they can get away with this kind of stuff. And that's why establishing that plan is so important.
a lot of them grew up in the world of church where sex was always a bad thing, and it's always been, and like Josh Duggar, people like that, they grew up in that type of world. And so they become it's really weird. It's almost like groomed predators, turn into predators who then attack and do this to other kids. So that was one big thing happened. And people who go to my church who are watching this might not know that, but there was a kid and that happened, and all he was asked to do was step away. That's it. I don't know. I'm sure the police got involved. I'm sure it all.
All he was asked to do was step away. That's it. I'm sure the police got involved.
Did really go down, but nobody knows to this day what happened, because the church keeps that silent. They keep the scandals silent, and church should never keep scandals silent, right? Because inherently people that come to church are sinful.
Okay, so the first time I heard that clip, I definitely had issues with it, but watch B take up for Josh. There's a lot of talk about how Josh is covering up the essay of a child. I think to cover something up, that's like an active thing. That's something that takes intention. I don't know that I would call this covering it up. However, I think it is highly irresponsible to just put this in a video and say, all that happened is that he was asked to step away. I'm sure the police were contacted. Like, you can say in your head, like, I'm sure the police were contacted, but do you know that the police were contacted? Because that's something that is important. Josh has said himself how dishonest this organization is, how many red flags there were, how many times leadership had lied to him when he was still on staff. And so I'm thinking in my head, like, from his standpoint, while he was in the church, while he heard that, why would he have faith in them to do the right thing, to contact the police, if he didn't know for sure? That's my issue. I don't think he was actively covering something up. I just think he didn't have the details. He wasn't involved. He wasn't a youth pastor, and the person who did this was, but he didn't care to say, hey, so we contacted all of the correct authorities, right? Like, we've followed our procedures, correct? This is going to be taken care of appropriately. That's the question that I would have. And I talked to my mom about this because my mom was a children's pastor for years. And if you think that I give people the benefit of the doubt, this is where I learned it from. Because I told her the situation, I told her a little bit about Josh, and she's like, I think if you're on staff at a church, the assumption is that the police were contacted. The assumption is that they followed all of the proper procedures that they need to follow, because people in Arizona, if you work at a church, you are automatically a mandated reporter. And so it doesn't matter if you work with kids or not. If you work at a church, you are automatically a mandated reporter. And I also looked at a website about Canadian child welfare laws, and according to that website, it says that all adults in Canada have a duty to report child abuse. And so I think this is where we see the issue of Josh not knowing whether or not the police were contacted. And again, I don't want to get nitpicky or get too hung up on this. He talks about in the later video, like, oh, I'm sure my haters will take hold of this and not let it go and be like, haha, we got him. I don't think anybody is taking joy in this. This is a bad situation, and it was bad of him to include that in his video, and he knows it because he trimmed it out. But thankfully, we do still have that clip. I will link the Instagram that I got it from below. But Josh knew that including that was a mistake, and that's why he trimmed it out of the video. Now on to his community tab post. He said, hey, I got a few comments about some confusion with a story inside my church. Some people are asking if I covered up an essay. I must not have been clear, but the abuse was absolutely reported to the parents and the authorities. Then why would you say that you didn't know? Why would you say that all that happened was that that pastor was asked to leave? That doesn't track with me.
So that was one big thing happened. And people who go to my church who are watching this might not know that. But there was a kid, and that happened, and all he was asked to do was step away. That's it. I don't know. I'm sure the police got involved. I'm sure it all did really go down, but nobody knew. Nobody knows to this day what happened.
Also, I said I wouldn't say names in case the victim and their family didn't want the story out, but rest assured it was reported, which is why the meeting took place. The meeting was held because the pastors feared the media would get hold of the story. We were just told to stay silent if the media came around asking questions, which they didn't. Okay, so you're saying I didn't say names in case the victim and their family didn't want the story out. Then you should not have alluded to it. And this is the part where I'm going to get a little bit frustrated, because common sense tells us that if this family did not want the story out, you should have kept your mouth shut and not even referred to it in the vaguest of terms. Because somebody could say, oh, this was like 3 months before he got fired from that church. Hey, this pastor left that time. And maybe this family also left the church at that time. Oh, this girl was acting a little bit differently. People can put the pieces together. If somebody goes to this church and they did not know about what happened, which according to your retelling of the story, the congregation doesn't know, they might be able to piece it together based on the timeline that you gave and what you said. And so you are inadvertently outing the victim of SA. You should not have brought this up at all, and I don't understand the point in bringing it up. Now, a few additional thoughts about this. When I was talking to my mom, we talked about the community tab post, we talked about all of that, and she had two things that were kind of interesting to me, because I had asked her, if you got called into this meeting and you were just told, an essay occurred, the pastor's been asked to leave. If media comes to you with questions, don't say anything. I asked her, would you ask them if the police have been contacted, or would you just assume that they had been? And she said, well, like the church that I was at, I would assume that they had been. I would assume that leadership did what was right and legally required and contacted the police. But I would also have a follow-up question of, can you give me some more details about what happened after you found out that this went down? Because we might have other families and other students who hear about this and are concerned for their own kids' safety. So I want to be able to assure people that this was handled in a proper way. Can you give me some more details? And so I know that because she was a children's pastor, she has a little bit of a different perspective because she's thinking about things in a different way than Josh would be, just because of their functions in the church. But I think that that's a reasonable question. That's something that somebody should have asked. Like, you guys are just in a meeting and you hear that this happened, the pastor's leaving, don't talk to the media. And you don't ask any questions, especially when you're Josh and you're already thinking that something shady is going on. And if this was 3 months before he left the church, I'm confused as to why he was in that meeting anyway, because according to his story, he thinks they fired him for being on paternity leave, and he threw such a fuss about having to come in for a performance review while he was on paternity leave, because he said, you legally can't ask me to come in. So why was he at a meeting anyway? Just something to think about. And then the other thing that my mom brought up is, what was his motivation for sharing the story? I don't know. I think that Josh, like I said, is hurt and feeling a little bit vindictive and wanting to bash the church that he used to work at, and he let his own emotions get in the way of better judgment. Because at the end of the day, let's just assume that police were contacted, this was handled in the legal way that it needed to be handled. It doesn't need to be brought up, because you're sitting here saying the victim might not want to be outed, and yet you're talking about them. So this was a self-serving thing. This was you trying to prove your point and trying to make a little bit of a jab at your former church, your former employer, because you're still pissed off that they didn't treat you like the king that you thought you deserved to be treated as. Last few sentences were, I am looking into whether or not that youth leader was charged or not. After we were told about it, nothing more was ever said or brought up again. Hope that clears it up. P.S. If I ever found out about a pastor abusing a child, you better believe I would do everything in my power to bring that person down. You'll do everything except ask if the authorities were contacted, I guess. I'm not going to put these up here because I don't want anybody to go find the people who left these comments. But some of the comments on the community tab are really just astounding to me. I'm dumbfounded. Somebody commented, I'm not sure why it's so hard to listen. That's exactly what you said the first time. You're so patient. It's literally not. It factually, contractually, and legally, it is not. That is not what you said in the clip. You said, I'm sure they were contacted, not they absolutely were contacted. Someone else said, I think you were clear. People are reaching because remember, you must have to do something really bad to get fired from a church. This was clearly your confession. Eye roll emoji. No, he wasn't clear. That's the thing though. If he was clear, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I don't think there's a good way for him to bring this up. There's not a good way for him to do it, and I think he should have just avoided it altogether, because I get that he wants to be like, this happens all the time. Churches cover it up all the time, and he wants to provide an anecdote and take a little jab at his old church. But that's essentially you admitting that you were complicit in not spreading the truth as you say that these people should do. Again, I don't think he actively covered it up. He said that nobody ever came to him and asked him about it, but he's saying, like, when stuff like this happens, you need to talk about it. It needs to be exposed. People need to know. And yet you're saying that you didn't abide by that belief because you didn't even ask any questions. You just heard what happened. You were like, okay, and you went on your merry way. So you're not even following the beliefs that you claim to have, the moral standing that you are up on your soapbox about. You're not even living by it. And even now, being super vague, oh yeah, this thing happened. I don't know if the police were called. Oh, I'm absolutely sure the police were called. Oh, I wouldn't say anything because what if the victim wants to remain anonymous? If I ever heard about somebody abusing a child, you know I'd do everything in my power to take them down. Pick a lane. This is exhausting. This isn't just a case of people taking something out of context or hearing something slightly off and being like, ooh, how can I twist that? How can I make this worse for Josh? How can I take this and run with it? This is you literally just doing something that you should not have done, you should not have spoken about, and you definitely shouldn't be lying about because you are backtracking, you are rewriting history, you are saying, I thought I was cleared. The police were absolutely contacted, and now you've got your fans who will just take anything you say as fact and be like, yeah, that's what you said. They can't go back and watch what you said because you cut it out of your video, and I think you cut it out of the video because you knew that it was bad. But I rambled enough about this community post. Let's get to Josh's second video.
That Challenge Podcast. My name is Josh. I just want to do a quick video. This is going to be like a few minutes max about a story I did yesterday in Hillsong and talked about my church. And of course, you know, I said something that people went just bananas. They're going to make all my haters are going to make all the videos they can make about it. So I just want to get out ahead so that you guys can hear with my words what actually happened with this meeting at my church. It's actually a pretty big deal. And so
people could hear in your words what happened if you didn't cut that part out of your video. That's a thought. And again, I'm like, he's sitting here being like, my haters are going to make a video, and then I'm sitting here making a video. I don't hate Josh. I just think what he did was a bad choice, and he's handling it really badly.
Let's talk about it real quick. So I said in the Hillsong documentary that we had a meeting at my church, and this is, I was trying to allude to a lot of churches have these types of meetings because they go down. Whenever there's a scandal inside of a church, they will have a meeting, because they don't want the staff to talk to the media about these scandals, right? Like any corporation or anything like that, modern churches are like corporations. So I don't know if I was not clear. I mean, I guess not, because people were freaking out. I had some comments, and then I got, obviously, you know.
I love how he's so nonchalant. Like, oh, I guess I wasn't clear because people were freaking out. You literally said that an adult pastor essayed a child, and that you don't know if the authorities were contacted. You were just told to be quiet. You don't think people are going to have a strong reaction to that? I'm confused.
Bunch of people making videos because they just can't, they're just oozing with hatred for me, and they just cannot wait to make a video about me. They're like, oh my God, he's a murderer. We got him dead to rights. No, that's not how this went down. So the meeting at the church was because the person was already removed from the church, was already reported to the police and all the authorities that needed place. People are talking about.
But that's not what you said. You didn't say that it had been reported. That's why people are upset. That's why you need to choose your words carefully. That's why you need to not let your hatred for your former employer get in the way of common sense and decency, because then you end up in situations like this.
Me being a mandated reporter and all this kind of stuff, and they're making all these allegations against me. It's absolutely not true. So here's how the story went down. I am a worship pastor. I'm not a youth pastor. This was not my department. I had nothing. I had no idea about this until the meeting. So
not my department. Why should I care? Just because it wasn't your department doesn't mean that it's not your business to know that somebody you work with is assaulting a child.
Meeting comes down. They say, hey, this guy did this thing. I don't even to this day know what it was. They just said it was inappropriate and it's been dealt with. And they said, rest assured, it's been dealt with. The parents have come in. Everything's kind of, you know, legally been taken care of. Because the churches, if anything, want to make sure that they're legally taken care of just for every reason. So we trusted our pastor. We said, okay, sounds good. Looks like you have everything under control. But then he said at the end of the meeting, he said, and if the media comes to you guys, you do not say anything. You come to us with anything that if the media asks you any questions. Because any church, especially a church of my size in any town, if a scandal goes down, it's going to be reported. And to this day, it wasn't reported. Likely because it was solved. I was not aware of an essay and didn't report or anything like that. As far as I'm aware, I don't know what happened after it got reported. I'm hoping the guy's in jail or whatever the case may be. I wonder if the parents pressed charges. And I also wonder if the parents asked the pastors of the church to keep it quiet, because a lot of victims don't want their stories out in the world, which I will never do. I'll never.
So you probably shouldn't have said anything in the first place.
Put this person's story out. I don't even know the person. And so partly that is the reason
You don't even know the person, and yet you feel it's your right to share that. And again, he didn't name any names, but if you know Josh, if you go to that church or if you went to the church at that time, I guarantee you there was gossip. I guarantee you there was talk. Nobody probably ever confirmed it, but let's be real. And if you go to church, if you go to a Christian church, you know this. If you're involved in your church, you know this. There's talk, there's gossip, there's whispers, there's, oh, that pastor left. That's kind of interesting. Have you ever noticed that he lingered around the high school students a little bit? Have you ever noticed that he was kind of flirty with that girl on the worship team? Have you ever noticed that those two staff members always seem to be together? Have you ever noticed that the small group pastor always seems to have like really red, irritated eyes? People talk. People say things in churches, and so I am sure there were rumors. I'm sure that girl probably told some of her friends, and so it made the rounds. Like, you didn't say her name, but you very well could have outed her to people who were able to connect the dots, and that's not okay. Here's the thing. If Josh wanted to share this experience and he did it in that way where he said, proper authorities were contacted, like legally everything was dealt with, everything was fine, but I'm still really bothered that the church wanted us to not say anything about it, that the church didn't do anything to, like take an active effort to prevent this from happening again, that we didn't have an additional round of background checks or an additional round of safety training. You know, it's great that they did what they should have done and they reported it to the police and that it was handled in that way, but I really wish that there had been something else to help prevent this kind of thing from happening in the future. If he had done that, that would be one thing. But the fact that he thinks he can come on here, say that somebody was assaulted, and then say that he doesn't know whether or not the police were contacted and that people are not going to be upset about it, it's wild to me. This is not something that people are just going to be like, yeah, sounds about right.
Pastor said, hey, look, it's not your business to put this child's story out to the world. So that's kind of where we were. And it makes sense, right? If we wanted to honor the parents and the victims' wishes to say, you don't just go tell them. If you work at a place and something happens, you don't go just tell the media, and if the media.
No, but you'll tell your 100,000 subscriber channel. That's fine. That's different.
It comes talking to us. We were told to talk to the pastors. They never did talk to me. I just want to get ahead of it because I know that every single person that hates me is going to make a video this long about it and how I'm the worst person on earth. But I want to let you know, guys, that it was taken care of. But I want to let you know that there is not an outstanding essay. It's not something I knew that nobody else knew, nothing like that. I still to this day don't know really what happened, except for that one meeting in that room. So I hope that clarifies everything. It probably won't for all of you who really hate me, but that's okay. I just wanted to make sure that that was clear because I made a community post and I want to make sure everybody sees it because I think you're owed that. So thanks for watching Dad Challenge Podcast, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Right. So he, in that last little bit, was making it sound like people were saying Josh was the only one who knew. Josh discovered this assault and he didn't say anything. He actively covered it up. And that's not what people are saying. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse with the amount of times I've said the same thing, just in a different way. But again, this is the thing. I am trying to make this as clear as possible for Josh. People are not saying that you were the only one who knew about it and you covered it up. People are taking the clip that you posted and then cut out of that video saying you were told not to say anything, but this thing happened and you don't know anything else about it. You don't know if the police were contacted. I'm sure the police and the parents were contacted, but I don't know. That's what you said. That's what the issue was. People are sitting here saying, if I heard about this thing that happened and I didn't know if the police had been contacted, I would have contacted the police because that's what decent people do. Decent people don't just say like, oh yeah, this kid got assaulted. I'm sure the cops were told. Like that's not the decent thing to do. And that's frustrating for a lot of people. It's frustrating for me. Why would you be so flippant about it? You're so upset about sexual assault being covered up, about people not being open about it, about churches trying to hide stuff, but you're going to come on here and just flippantly say that somebody got assaulted, a child got assaulted, and you don't know if the police were contacted? That's why people are upset. And maybe you said it wrong. Maybe you misspoke. I highly doubt it, because if that was just you misspeaking in the editing process, you or somebody else would have been like, hey, you sure you want to say this? I know he has an editor for some of his videos. Some of them he does on his own. If I was his editor, I would have been like, we sure we want to put that in there? And if I were him editing that and I heard myself say, oh, I don't know if the police were contacted, I would have been like, whoa, I totally misspoke. They absolutely were. Let me cut this out, or let me add something in and just clarify right off the bat, because I know how that sounds. Alternately, he could have just not said anything, which I think would have been the better choice, because he wants to come on here and say that he wants to protect this person's privacy, and he wouldn't say names, and he's not going to like expose what happened because of that person, because the victim wants to remain private. Then you shouldn't have said anything in the first place. You should have just left it out. I get that you have just like this itch that you need to scratch. It's like a vengeance itch, and you're like, come on, I gotta get this church, I gotta take them down, I gotta make a jab. But if you actually cared about the victim and you thought, she never came forward, she never shared her experience, she's probably really traumatized from this, so I should probably just keep it shut because it's not my place. And to add insult to injury, he provided a timeline of when this happened, which means that there are people who will be able to figure it out. And if you go to church, you know that. You know that there will be people who will be able to connect the dots and say, oh, that was probably her. That was probably him. That explains a lot. And that sucks, because then you have people that you never wanted to know about what happened to you in the first place knowing, because Josh can't seem to control his mouth sometimes. And it sucks. Again, my overall opinion is that I don't think he actively did anything to cover up what happened. Obviously, it was found out that pastor was fired, and most reasonable people would assume that their leadership did the appropriate and lawful thing and reported it to the police. I just think he didn't care. I just think he heard it and he was like, not my monkeys, not my circus, not my problem. I don't care. And now he wants to use this situation as a way to get back at the church, and he wants to pretend like it matters so much to him. And it's just disingenuous and it's fake. And that's so much of how I feel about Josh, is that his crusades, they're fake. They're not genuine. And maybe they started off being genuine. Maybe they started off as really big passions of his. And I said this in my first video, with him being an adoptive father. I am sure that the Micah Stauffer situation was something really like upsetting to him because of his experiences. And so I think he did start off in certain things being really genuine, but along the way he just kind of lost it. He got so focused in growth and numbers and his own self-interest that he kind of forgot to be a moral person, which, hey, if you don't want to be a moral person, that's your choice. That's totally up to you. But you also can't get upset when people call you out on your lack of morality, because you're doing it on a public platform. And like you said, you're one of the biggest people in the game. You got over 100,000 subscribers, so you're going to have to expect that people will be paying more attention to you because you're bigger. Let me know your thoughts on all of this down in the comments section below, and while you're doing that, if you would consider liking this video or subscribing to my channel, that would be incredible. And if you are subscribed already, thank you so much. I am so appreciative of you, and I love being able to just sit here, hang out with you, and talk about whatever. Thank you so much for watching. Please be kind to people, and I will see you in the next one.